I'll request Mr. Tom White, Chief of Emergency DRR UNICEF, to deliver the address. Thank you.
Firstly, let me just say a very warm congratulations to all of us, really, on this occasion of the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction. I think, on one hand, it really is a moment for us to come together and celebrate this community and all the achievements that we have come together to deliver for people at risk of and affected by disasters around the world. But this forum is very much focused on India, which, let's face it, has its fair share of disasters, and in terms of numbers, and in terms of complexities, and in terms of variety. It's really quite a rich context that we're working in here. I think when we look at the occasion of the DRR, when we look at this occasion, it's a moment to celebrate, and I congratulate the NIDM for bringing us together for this. It's also a moment to ponder and recognize that the job is not yet done. I think we're right here, I'm talking to a community of experts, we're speaking amongst ourselves, I'm preaching to the converted somehow, but we can acknowledge that we still have a mountain ahead of us. On that note, I think it's a poignant time to recognize the huge achievement of the government of India to host the G20 this year. And during the G20, in the leaders' declaration, there was a very clear commitment to ramp up actions to achieve the SDGs. Those sustainable development goals can only be sustainable if the disaster risk is mitigated or avoided altogether. If we look at the G20 results, this year was the first time ever that we saw a working group focused on DRR, disaster risk reduction. That's a huge achievement in terms of having the working group itself, but also all those deliberations, all those discussions, and the commitments that were laid out and included in that leadership declaration. I think that's a huge achievement and really something that we need to celebrate for the G20, for the world as a whole. But what does that mean for India? What are we going to do with that in India? And I think that's really something that cannot be answered in this room by us alone, but it's something we need to ponder, because we have a responsibility to take that and to deliver it to the people who are at risk, who are affected by disasters. Another thing I really want to appreciate, and we had the launch just now, but I really want to appreciate the huge dedication and the hard work of the National Institute of Disaster Management and the UNICEF team to pull together the SBC, the Social and Behaviour Change Toolkit that we just launched just now. This is a toolkit that has been a long time in the making. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, just about everyone in the room is familiar with the toolkit in one shape or another. But it's a toolkit that allows us to deliver tailored messages on earthquakes, on cyclones, on floods, and on public health emergencies. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they are four. And it's a toolkit that will be, it's still a work in progress, but it will be tailored to states where there are the states that are facing these risks in particular. So it's a work in progress, and it will be tailored, it will be piloted in a number of states. Why is this important? Because so often the people who are most at risk, the most affected by these disasters, are not familiar with these key messages. These key messages are helping them to understand how to prepare, how to protect themselves, how to take precautions before, and most importantly during, those events. So this is a work in progress, and I really want to take a moment to commend and to thank every individual who's been involved in that project so far. And I look forward to really seeing how that's going to translate. And UNICEF stands ready to continue to support this, to expand on the work that has been done, both in terms of the disasters, but also in terms of the geographical scope and the coverage and application. Because this will have to continue to evolve as we know more, as we have a better proximity and understanding of those risks and understandings and perceptions by those communities. I think when we talk about the disaster risk reduction, particularly in India, and talking with my UNICEF hat on now, not just a DRR person, but DRR coming from a UNICEF perspective, we really want to see a situation where every child is prepared, is engaged, safe and resilient against the predictable disasters. In India, if we really take that down to the India context, it's particularly important, it's critical to protect and promote girls' rights. This is a context where girls continue to really face the biggest struggle before, during, after disaster shocks and stresses. And I think we really need to harness our community to really acknowledge where those risks continue to prevail and where these challenges continue to exist in terms of how best to address those issues. This International Day of Disaster Risk Reduction, we look at the reciprocal relationship between disasters and inequality. I mentioned girls, I mentioned children more broadly, but there are also women in general, there are transgender issues, there are people with disabilities, the list goes on. And it looks slightly different in every community. It's not one homogeneous group and society that we live in. We all know this. But we need to be agile in the way that we work, the way that we formulate our policies, our tools, our toolkits. We need to be agile and flexible in the way that we apply ourselves and support our partners and our communities when we deliver the results that we should be delivering for those most at risk, those most affected, the most vulnerable, the hardest to reach. This is no easy task. It never will be. We've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. If I revert back to the child responsive disaster risk reduction, while I talk about children wearing a UNICEF hat, actually we're talking about disaster risk reduction, which is responsive to all the vulnerable community members. Community members as individuals, but also community members as a group, whether they are girls, women, transgender, disabled. It will look different in different communities at different times. But responsive DRR for the most vulnerable, for the most at risk, for the hardest to reach, is everybody's business. It's everybody's business because if it is well done, if we invest now, ahead of the disaster, ahead of the shock, of the stress, then we will be in a position to save costs during the recovery time. There is a significant dividend with the investment versus the return. I'd just like to summarize to say this is a real pleasure to be here. Once again, congratulations to the entire community. And I think, just to echo the point where UNICEF stands ready to continue this support with the NID and with the disaster risk reduction community as a whole across India and wider across the planet. And I think one suggestion may be that we have been working with Professor Santosh with the child-centered DRR. This is a community of best practice that we're developing. Let's say it is developed. We're in the process of really sort of honing and drawing results from there. Perhaps we can look at how we can work with that center to expand the scope with UNICEF, with others, to be able to bring in a more targeted approach for other vulnerable community members. But that's a suggestion for a follow-up conversation. But on that note, thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much for